Percentages converting from fractions and decimals using number chips. This is a digital lesson, and this one is football themed. So the lesson starts with explaining what a percentage is. It's a comparison out of 100. So 45% means 45 out of 100. And here's some very simple conversions between decimals, fractions, and percentages. So if we have a decimal here and it's read 56 hundredths, it's also written this way as a fraction, 56 hundredths. So 56 hundredths would equal 56%. 73 hundredths as a decimal, a fraction, and a percentage. And then one whole would be at 100%. So starting on slide 3, students are going to be moving these number chips into the correct place to show conversion between decimals and percentages. And these are fairly simple. Students have these number chips. They're going to move just by clicking on the edge. They can move it where they like. Every slide has every number the students need. So as these problems get more difficult and students get to the end of the slide and the numbers aren't working, that means they've made an error somewhere and they need to go back and check. So in that way, it's self-checking. This is a good practice slide because these are fairly simple. They can get some practice moving the chips. So 12%, 59%, and then of course 100%, and so on. Now the next slide shows how to convert a decimal to a percentage by moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. So here we have 62 hundredths. If we move that decimal point 2 places to the right, we get 62%. Here we have 1 74 hundredths. Move the decimal point 2 places to the right, we get 174%. And then here, if we're moving that decimal point 2 places to the right and there is no number here, then you just have to add a 0. So this would be 30%, not 3%. So the next slide, they're going to practice this. So they need to be a little bit careful, move their decimal point 2 places to the right. So this first one would be 65%. And over here, 6.5% if we move that decimal point. This one, we have to move 2 places to the right, but since there's no number here, we have to add a 0, so that would be 70%. This one would be 7%, and so on. Now they're shown how to convert a fraction to a percentage by first changing that fraction to a decimal. So here we have a fraction of 9/20. We want to first convert it to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator, if we can. So here, if we multiply the numerator and denominator by 5, we get 45 hundredths, which looks like this as a decimal and would be 45%. 1250 is multiply the numerator and denominator by 2. We get an equivalent fraction of 24 hundredths, which would look like this as a decimal, and 24%. So students are going to be doing this on the next 3 slides. And they're going to move 100 into place first. So if we multiply the numerator and denominator by 5, we get an equivalent fraction of 30 hundredths. 30 hundredths as a decimal would look like this. And if we move that decimal point 2 places to the right, we get 30%. So same thing on the next one. We want 100 in our denominator, so we're going to multiply numerator and denominator by 2, and then go ahead and convert to a decimal and a percentage. Same thing on the next slide. They have some different denominators. They're going to convert to 100. Same thing here. And then when we get to slide 10, sometimes we can't convert directly to 100. So we can't multiply 40 times any number to get 100. But we can simplify that fraction and then convert it. So here, if we simplify by dividing the numerator and denominator by 2, we get an equivalent fraction of 9/20. Now we can convert it to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator. So students are going to be doing that on the next 2 slides. Simplify first. So here they can divide the numerator and denominator by 3. That gives them 2 fifths. And then they want to convert it to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator by multiplying by 20. And that will give them 40 hundredths. And they can go ahead and convert to a decimal and a percentage. Same thing here, we're going to simplify first and then convert it. And they're going to keep doing the same thing on the next two problems. Now there are fractions that we can't convert to equivalent fractions with 100 in the denominator. For example, if their denominator is 8. So here we have to use long division. So we're going to take 5 and divide by 8. And here shows how to do that. We get a quotient of 625 thousandths. And to convert it to a percentage, we move that decimal point 2 places to the right. So the next slide, they've got a division problem. Most of it's already done for them. They just have to move the numbers in the correct place in the quotient. And then they're going to place this movable decimal point into the correct place for their percentage. And the final slide, they have to do all of the division themselves. They're going to convert to a decimal and then to a percentage and make sure they move that decimal point. So this is the football version of percentages, converting from fractions and decimals with number chips.